Well, welcome everybody to the middle school campus of MKA, the site here today of baseball action. It is senior day for the Cougars as they take on their rivalrous Minutemen of Newark Academy. So the Minutemen traveling from Livingston over to the middle school campus where MKA surely hopes to celebrate a momentous occasion here today. Senior day, always the top fixture on your calendar when you first glance at the schedule for your team's campaign, as the heavy hit already in order. Lembo fields it, and already the first at-bat for Newark Academy sees the light of first base. And so already off to the races, Newark Academy. Not the ideal start for Jack Amarata, the storied pitcher for MKA over the course of the season. But of course, on this senior day matchup, we are to honor and cherish the 5 seniors who are in the ranks of the baseball program, as Amarata sees forth the errant throw to first, and just like that, Newark Academy ducks on a pond for the first time today. And so perhaps room for Amarata to at least get some of the cobwebs out, to rust out some of the previous errors. Certainly has been a while since the senior featured on the mound, but of course we are to honor our 5 seniors in the baseball program in this 2023 campaign. That is, of course, the likes of Jack Amarata, the pitcher right here, Nick Lembo, currently operating out of right field, Max Nussbaum, of course, who's unfortunately injured, Julian Coviello, who's operating out of right field, Coviello out of left field, and Lembo out of right field, and then Elliot Barada, whose true allegiance, I like to think, is with MKA TV over MKA Baseball. And meanwhile, also worthy of mentioning, unless if you already couldn't have easily told enough, we have no scoreboard for today, so apologies for the technical difficulties on our end. I'll try to update you with the count instead of meandering with my words. So 1-1 the count, still no outs, and of course a nagging Minutemen over at second. But of course, not the ideal conditions for your senior day matchup. Bit of a slight downpour here amidst gray, foggy skies over in Montclair. But of course, any day is a good day for baseball, especially when you are honoring the seniors on your team. And so the 5 seniors here today, hopefully they will have a performance worthy of honoring their names. Meanwhile, 2 more balls emanating from Amarata to make the count 3-1. Meanwhile, we'll see if the battery of our camera holds up for the duration of the matchup. It's going to be a close call again, but we have had other close calls with the battery, mainly our matchup against Montclair High School, where, if you recall, meanwhile, a full count out there on the field, the camera died literally a few seconds after, I believe, Carlesimo made the final catch to secure victory over Montclair High School, as the foul ball right there to remain it at the full count. And so the camera expiring just seconds after the final catch, and MKA went off to celebrate, and certainly perhaps the most momentous, most brilliant display of baseball action over the campaign for the Cougars. But we'll see if they can establish quite the victory over the Minutemen here today, as that one enough to walk the second at-bat for the day over to first. And so, far from ideal from Amarata's vantage point, man on second and first as well, aiding the Minutemen in their search to strike first here at the middle school. Still no outs to respond, as Amarata has a word with Eli Solomon, of course, the catcher for much of this season after Lucas Seeger, the predominant, usually go-to catcher, is out with an injury, the main commit. And so MKA will surely hope for a reunited presence with him in the 2024 campaign. As we look to the final stages of this season, however, a back-and-forth mixed bag of results, and 9-14. Is the Cougars' record, coming off a 5-1 loss to West Orange. Before then, it was back-to-back victories, 6-2 against Behringer and then 10-0 against Lodi. So, hectic back and forth. I like to call it a roller coaster of a season, as 0-2. The count, Amarata slowly reawakening from the first 2 at-bats. We'll see if he can conjure in the first out. And so, back and forth baseball action for the Cougars. Meanwhile, the very high ball right here, to be caught, it will be, by Quinn Carlesimo. And certainly the more difficult grab for the sophomore, that's for sure. But in the end, it is safely with the shortstop's hands. And so, 1 out, but 2 more to go. Still men on second and first, aiding Newark Academy. And so at long last, able to draw forth that first out. And so we'll see if MKA can find smooth sailing on the defense for the rest of the top of the first. Is that one from Murata? Not good enough. Well, actually, yes, it will be. At least from my vantage point, look to be a little bit too to the right of the box, but clearly the umpire thinks otherwise, and I'll certainly take that from my vantage point. So 0-1, hoping Murata as the next one draws in and sails in there as well. 0-2. And so the strikes keep coming from Jack Murata, and certainly igniting a spark as the top of the first goes on. And so the opportunity now, just like that, to get the second out. That one, a little bit too undercooked, and just about colliding with the AstroTurf. Meanwhile, for Newark Academy, a 13-8 record posed by the visiting Minutemen, albeit in a lower division. So Newark Academy participating in the SEC Colonial Division, that is one below MKA's SEC Liberty Division. As that hit right there, still not enough to see through the swing and a miss. Some contact found on that one, so still remaining at that 1-2 count. One out in the process. Still ducks on a pond for Newark Academy alongside a man on first. Those are the circumstances outlining the next pitch from Murata. What could be a greatly needed first strikeout of the ball game. That one, a high flying ball, and ultimately to cause some property damage. Maybe not quite. Could have struck a car, and so if you parked on Central Road, my apologies, there might be quite the crack on your windshield. So still remaining at that 1-2 count, and so certainly for MKA, residing unfortunately at the bottom of the pack of the Liberty Division, as that went in there for 2-2. Nonetheless, they did enjoy quite the momentous victory over against Behringer. That was at home field, 6-2 the score, and so Behringer the second lowest in the division. So the Cougars still making things competitive in the Super Essex Conference. Meanwhile, Jack Murata with his first strikeout of the morning. And just like that, 2 outs, aiding the Cougars at the top of the first on this senior day matchup. And of course, if there is one fixture on the calendar that you do want to win, perhaps the argument could be made it is this one right here. Of course, Newark Academy not within the division, and so not that divisional opponent. Nonetheless, they are a rival, as Rizzio able to get in the third out for MKA, and they'll be clutching the bat at the bottom of the first. So now starting out the bottom of the first inning, it is Jake Rendino, the sophomore, as always, to find himself at the top of the batting order. And so we'll see what the underclassmen can deliver, of course, for his seniors on this senior day matchup, and for his team by extension, of course, playing the rivalrous Newark Academy Minutemen, regardless of whether or not it's a senior day. One of MKA's biggest rivals, them in Montclair High School, I would at least argue. Certainly want to get the victory in today. So Rendino, the first to start off what could be an MKA response and an MKA draw of first blood here at the middle school. Weather still not letting up, a bit of a wind picking up and still rain coming downwards. And so we'll see what Mother Nature has in store for us as we also check out what the pitcher has in store for Jake Rendino, gripping the bat. And so in there for the first strike already, Newark Academy looking to make up for their silent top of the first, in there for the 1-1 count in the process. So Jake Rendino, the storied hitter for the Cougars ranks, that's for sure, always trying to start off MKA's mounted offensive response at virtually the start of every ballgame. He's always maintained that top of the batting order position all the way since opening day against Bloomfield. I remember covering that matchup over at Bloomfield High School, the unfortunate loss for the Cougars. Nonetheless, now 1-2 the count. Taking a swing at it, finds some contact, not sufficient. Still remaining at that fixed count of 1-2. And so the Cougars eager to fire off to the races. Certainly beneficial to get that early lead just to set the momentum and tempo for the rest of the matchup as a heavy hit offered up by Rendino to be caught by the shortstop. So 1 down and 2 to go for Newark Academy. And so Rendino right there, at least putting up a bit of a challenge on the at-bat right there. And before committing the foul ball, was able to get in a nice piece of contact, ultimately caught with a minimum of fuss. Nonetheless, next up is Jack Amorata. And if there is one batter who's capable of wreaking some serious havoc on the defensive field, it will be the senior, finding himself on both ends of the pitch here. And he certainly also has been a storied hitter for the Cougars ranks over the course of this season. Nonetheless, in there for 1-1, I like to call this count snake eyes. And normally you'd be able to tell if there was the scoreboard right there, there'd be a dot illuminating both balls and strikes. And so I like to call that snake eyes, but I know it's a controversial sort of term that I've coined, basically. So 2-1 the count, working against the pitcher at the moment. And so still with sights to get some prospective real estate. That one not enough to make it 2-2. And so relatively good pitching as of right now. The opportunity to quickly enough, you may sense, get that second out for Newark Academy. And so certainly their work cut out for them in the first inning, that of the Cougars. At least able to silence the Minutemen, but nonetheless finding it sort of difficult to advance man over to the bases. So 3-2, the full count, underpinning the next pitch right here. So Amorata with prospects to get something good here. That'll surely do it. Straight off to center field. And just like that, Amorata able to advance for first base. And the first hit of the day comes for MKA. And you just may have sensed, and I did predict right there before, if there is a man to at least get the dice rolling, to get the dominoes falling for the Cougars, it would be Jack Amorata, able to deliver brilliantly, both on the pitch and on the at-bat. And so next up is Quinn Carlesimo, the sophomore, who just before was able to accrue the third out at the top of the first. Now looking to translate excellent defense into offense, already finding that 1-0 count. Still 1 out working against MKA, and Amorata over on first base, cheating off at 2. And so, what will be next for the sophomore? A heavy hit, simply vanishing amidst the gray sky to be caught? Not quite. And within the field of play, too. And just like that, Amorata over to second, and Carlesimo on first. A brilliant hit right there from Quinn Carlesimo to keep the men moving for MKA. Ducks on a pond for the first time today, and it is the senior Amarata on second, the sophomore Carlesimo over on first. And that one right there, a brilliant smooth piece of contact. For a second, you may have sensed that that was going to be a foul ball, but it was able to find that sweet spot between the right outfielder and the first baseman. So maybe some miscommunication, just maybe a perfect hit right there as another one in told. That one just a little bit short, and so ultimately out for the foul ball. And meanwhile, so to remind you, we do lack a scoreboard right now, and our battery may be dimming down the more improvised setup, but we did figure that, this is the senior day matchup for the MKA baseball team, and so we ought to try our best in light of the circumstances to deliver some sentiments of a broadcast here. So next up, Alessandro Rizzio. Yeah, another sophomore within MKA's ranks, and so certainly a youth-heavy team. This MKA baseball program boasts at the moment 3 of their top 4 on the batting order are sophomores. So something to look forward to in the later years is already a nice cut from Rizzio. Unfortunately, able to be caught out. And so that will be the third out needed for the Minutemen to retire the first inning. And just like that, they will be on the at-bat to start out the top of the second. So now at the top of the second inning, as already Amarata able to deliver the foul ball, so 0-1, so the score, need I remind you, 0-0, a clean slate, underlining the two sides tallies, and so a matter of who will strike first as we progress to the second inning, as a very towering ball right there in the process, straight to the outfield to be caught by Julian Caviello. And so a nice bit of catching right there by the senior. 1 out and 2 more to be conjured up for MKA. And so, as always, trusted and consistent, Julian Caviello able to deliver over at left field. And so did require some discussion between the senior and Rendino, the sophomore, over here at center field. Nonetheless, on his big day, senior day, Caviello able to deliver for MKA's defense. So in there for the first out of the second inning. Amarata, meanwhile, continuing to delivering from the mound. Already 1 strike in, make it 2. Jack Amarata absolutely on fire as of right now. And so the opportunity to get what I do believe is his second strikeout of this morning. That one in there, not enough. So 1-2 the count, working for Amarata. as the weather here still does not favor us by any stretch of the imagination, still remaining at a slight downpour, some rain in the process. A nice little bit of atmosphere as the hit right there from the at-bat finds itself to Nick Lembo. And so a man on first. Almost said force there. I was like, what? Man on first for Newark Academy to increase the prospects of what could be the first run of the morning for either of the two sides. And so that right there, bit of a letdown for Jack Amorata. He was able to get in the 0-2 count, nonetheless drawing in a ball and then quite the heavy hit down right field. And so enough to get a man on a base to get that first run of the second inning. We'll see if Amorata can clean things up here at the middle school. Of course, behind me, an empty softball field. A shout out to MKA's softball team. We covered their senior day last week over against Bloomfield. And so now baseball's turn on the other side of the middle school field. That one, meanwhile, a heavy swing and a miss. Yet again, aiding Jack Amorata. So 0-1 the count, 1 out in the process. Newark Academy man on first. So all the presence for the visitors as a second swing and a miss. Jack Amorata still delivering as of right now to make it yet again that 0-2 count. We'll see if the senior can finalize things this time around for the third at-bat of the inning. The opportunity to do such here. That one in there. Able to get something of a contact nonetheless to keep the count fixed. And so, MKA, certainly the favorites heading into this matchup, residing in the higher division over that of Newark Academy. Nonetheless, silenced as of right now, but the opportunity remaining for something special. And of course, if there is a man to head off such efforts, it would be Jack Amorata. Meanwhile, man trudging on over to second. Actually, not quite, obviously, because of the foul ball. And so, I mean, it was a rather obvious foul ball. I'm not sure why he decided to, perhaps going on a jog. That's my best guess. So, of course, if there is a man to spearhead such efforts, it is Jack Amorata, with quite the successful season over the course of his final year of servitude for MKA baseball. When I think of Jack Amorata's highlight reel over the course of the season, I definitely think to the Montclair Kimberly versus Montclair High School matchup. Filming that one a few weeks ago over on Montclair turf. And so Rafi Aronson, the man behind the mic for that one, and certainly just quite the unbelievable day for Jack Amorata. Strikeout after strikeout, simply able to absolutely silence the Mounties on the at-bat right there. So a brilliant performance from Amorata, and meanwhile, much of the same from the senior here today, able to get in another strikeout. And so 2 outs now for MKA at this top of the second inning. Bit of a slow-moving start to the ball game thus far, but we'll see if Amorata can gift his side the chance of an at-bat with the opportunity to take the lead here. Not surrendering any more runs as that one in there for the foul ball to make it 0-1 yet again. And so Amorata, if he's not able to deliver the clean strike, able to at least force the improvised swing from the at-bat, that's able to most oftenly get in the foul ball. So certainly a very good pitching performance thus far from Jack Amorata. But can he see it through across 2 innings here? 0-1 the count. That one just a little bit too overcooked. So 1-1 in the process. Still a Minuteman on first. That will be their only presence in the diamond down yonder as Amorata fires back towards him. Meanwhile, Ben Ottner, the man operating out of first base. He was the pitcher last matchup against West Orange. I believe that was on a Wednesday or a Thursday. I don't know. As a senior on my May term, it's rather hard for me to keep track of the days. So meanwhile, that hit right there actually will be a foul ball, I believe, as Coach Ralph Pacifico, you may be able to hear him right there commanding Nick Lembo to run over, but perhaps Lembo, certainly occupying the better vantage point, knew that one was going in for the foul ball and estimated, at least from his ability that he would not be able to deliver the out in the process. Still one strike away from seeing through the inning and not able to do so right there. 2-2 the count for Jack Amarata. Still that opportunity to see MKA's offensive stance yet again, nagging over the head of the senior pitcher. And so quite the excellent season for Amarata thus far. Nonetheless, full count in the offing. We saw that best illuminated over at the MHS matchup, and so he will be bringing his pitching services over to Gettysburg next year. So Gettysburg College, the Bullets, that is the mascot for whom Amarata will trade his stance for, and so that one right there, not enough for Amarata. And so Doug's on a pond for Minutemen yet again, as well as the runner heading over to first. And so, slowly but surely, increasing the prospects for what could be the first run of the day. Newark Academy able to profit off the walk right there from Amarata. And so, a mixed pitching performance in light of the last play right there. We'll see if Amarata can break up from the scrabble as the pitch over to, well, the throw over to second. A bit too overcooked for Carlesimo operating out of that position. And so Amarata, not certainly his best day in the office thus far, but still the early stages of the ball game. A slowly dragging out ball game, certainly both two sides occupying, I would say, a bit of a stalemate as of right now. Still a fixed 0-0 slate. Nonetheless, 2 outs in the process. Yet again, Solomon are already in a bit of a duel right here. Trying to close out the runner, able to tag him, and that right there will be quite the clutch way to get your third out of the second inning. And so MKA able to tag out the runner between second and third, being caught a bit too bold on that front. And so down to the bottom of the second, MKA with the opportunity to put runs on the board. Now to start the bottom of the second inning for MKA, still remaining at that 0-0 score line. And so both two sides occupying a bit of a deadlock as of late. And so we'll see if the Cougars are up to the task of breaking such a deadlock in their senior day matchup against their rivalrous foes, Newark Academy. And so the first of the batting order to start out the inning, it is Eli Solomon, and he has quite the reputation as a successful hitter, able to get in some heavy, powerful swings on the ball, heading up to the upper echelons, as I predict right there. Much to credit myself, but doesn't look to get enough distance, and so able to be caught by the shortstop. And just like that, 1 out already underway for Newark Academy. And so MKA will have to keep searching to find their first run of the second. And just like that, one heavy hitter after another. Nick Lembo, the senior, on his big day. We'll see if he could bring in a dinger. And so the slugger, as he's accrued his reputation over his time spent with the baseball program, that one in there for the ball. So 1 out, aiding the visiting Minutemen. 1 ball in the process on Lembo's at-bat here. The next one in there. Ooh. Exercising some last-minute response from Lembo. Looks to be in there, I believe, for the second ball. Of course, I base my judgment off the actual scoreboard here at the middle school campus, but whoever is operating that fell behind the controls on that front right there as Lembo takes a swing on it. Not enough to warrant much, and so 2-1 the count, ordaining the seniors at bat as of right now. And so MKA, we don't know if they're perhaps a little annoyed that they're still occupying this fixed equal tally between them and Newark Academy. Certainly heading in there, whenever you head into a senior day matchup, you certainly have that expectation to win. You want to win, but certainly you're much more likely to schedule an opponent, or you are able to do such. And so 3-1 the count. That one, the second strike, albeit to make things all the more interesting. Full count now, working against Nick Lembo. Just like that could be the opportunity for Newark Academy to get in their second out, to see through a relatively quick second inning, not before Lembo mounts one last stance off the half-baked swing right there. And so MKA certainly working their way into the circumstances of the matchup. We'll see if they can find themselves triumphant as the heavy swing right there. Ultimately in for the foul ball. And so, putting up quite the challenge, Nick Lembo. We'll see if he can at long last pay dividends as the heavy hit right there. Over towards the shortstop, who yet again, 2 catches from him and 2 outs conjured up by Newark Academy to see through quite the successful bottom of the second thus far. And so MKA still silenced as of late. Next up, it is Nolan Jives, the junior. And so, grabbing the bat for the first time today, we'll see if Jives can break the chain of events, the current trend of a relative defensive masterclass between the two sides right here. Quite the same it was last time out. MKA played against West Orange. It was an ultimate tally of 5-1, but up until the top of the 5th inning, it was still 0-0 between the two sides, and a relatively quick ball game too, I might add. A flurry of catches and outs across the field, and great pitching performances both from Ben Ottner for MKA, as well as the West Orange pitcher was able to see quite the stalemate between the two sides all the way up until the final batch of innings, when West Orange was unfortunately able to explode. So 5-1 the tally of MKA's last time out, breaking the 2-game streak they had. Meanwhile, 2-1 the count. To make it 2-2, Jives with quite the emphatic hit right there, only to collide with the fencing above, and so the opportunity with one last pitch to see through the top of the 3rd inning. Will it be conjured up from Newark Academy? That one, swing and a miss. And Newark Academy will be grabbing the bat yet again for the top of the 3rd inning. The score remains 0-0. So to start out the top of the third inning, the scoreline remaining a fixed 0-0. A clean slate between the two sides, allowing the perfect opportunity for either Newark Academy or MKA to draw first blood here. As Amarata continues his presence at the mound, we did seem to find Alessandro Rizzio over beyond left field, throwing some warm-up pitches, so we'll see if the sophomore services can be called up, as Ottner, easily enough, able to collect the ball over to first base. And so just like that, MKA able to discover their first out of the top of the third. They'll need two more where that came from, obviously. And so Amarata and Ottner, teamwork between junior and senior. And so we'll see if MKA can continue to deliver to see forth a more quick top of the third inning. Their last two defensive stances did draw on a bit longer and did emanate quite the scare from Newark Academy. Both innings were able to find ducks on a pond, so we'll see if MKA has rediscovered their marbles as the down swinging pitch right there to make it 2-0 the count, still an out in the process. Aiding MKA's field right here, Amarata yet again. A heavy swing disguised in the air, jives operating out of third to be able to catch it. And so, junior and junior operating on first and third, able to summon outs 1 and 2. And so they'll need one more where that came from. A relatively quick top of the third inning underway here at the middle school. And so Amarata, we did talk about his amazing pitching abilities over the course of his final campaign for MKA, but also another thing to mention is how quick he delivers these pitches, or at least the time exposed, time lapsed in between each pitch too. He doesn't need a pitch clock, that's for sure. And we did see it a lot more in the MHS game, but certainly allowing a few seconds breather before he yet again delivers an amazing pitch to make it 0-2. The count right now. Amarata rediscovering some seriously beneficial form for his side. And so now the opportunity, I do believe, to get in one final strike to see through the third inning. Not quite right there. And a little bit too undercooked for the glove of Eli Solomon operating as the catcher. Scoreboard at the middle school claims it's a 1-1 count. I do believe it's 1-2. That's my judgment call, so we'll see who prevails in my battle with the scoreboard, or with the scoreboard operator. I do believe it's Max Nussbaum who operates the scoreboard, as he did admit that he once fell asleep behind the controls. Not literally, but, you know, forgot about it. Of course, Max Nussbaum, the Clark commit himself. Quite the lost blow. Oh, so I was correct, and Nussbaum was wrong. So that was the third strike to see through the top of the third inning. And MKA, amazing quick work being made done of the Minutemen. We'll see if they can at long last put up some runs to show for it. So now to start the bottom of the third inning. Still a clean slate between the two sides. 0-0, 0-0. I know Other members of MKTV frown upon my use of nil to nil. That's usually a more soccer-heavy reference to the score 0-0. But I still like to use it and employ it, even in other sports, including America's pastime. And so Ben Ottner to lead the batting order at the bottom of the third for MKA, withstanding the strike. So 0-1 the count, working against the junior. But need I remind you, last time out, I was behind yet again, conducting this similar operation, a one-man show of camera, commentator, and I was also the scoreboard operator back when we had a functioning scoreboard, but the iPad is slowly passed away as of right now in light of our improvised setup for today. So our apologies on that front. You'll have to abide by my words as of right now. 1-2 the count, working against Ottner, but nonetheless, when MKA last stepped up to the bat over against West Orange, Ottner with quite the triumphant display as a pitcher. Nonetheless, in the process, it will be said pitcher turned batter for right now, who's able to be caught out. The first out of the bottom of the third. As our battery slowly withers away, we'll see how much more baseball action we can capture. So 1 out in the process for Newark Academy. 2 more where that came from, obviously, for the rivals, venturing over here to the middle school campus. Meanwhile, next up, I do believe it is Elliot Barada. And a large smile growing on my face, that's for sure. MKA TV's very own co-leader. It's me and there's him. And at long last, it is Barada on his big senior day, stepping up to the plate. And so already an 0-2 count, unfortunately, working against Barada right here. Nonetheless, we'll see if the senior and, more importantly, MKTV co-leader can bring something together. That one in there for the ball. And so Elliot Barada able to exercise some very conscious, careful judgment to allow the ball to expire through. So 1-2 the count, working against Barada. And so we'll see if the senior can bring something magical here for MKA. Takes a swing at it. And a brilliant sight at that one. Very unfortunate not to have gotten more distance or accuracy on that swing. Nonetheless, Barada with quite the stance on his at-bat today for MKA. Still 1-2 the count. 1 out in the process. That one through. And still undercooked. Barada maintaining his presence at home plate. The senior looking absolutely brilliant as of right now. 2-2 the count. And you just love to see it. MKTV's very own able to see it through the full count. And Barada keeping a brilliant presence over at home plate. I was saying before, he may be a baseball player, but his true allegiance is with MKTV. And so we'll see if he can hit a ball over to my vantage point. As that one, able to see Elliot Barada go over to first base. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Elliot Barada with a brilliant stance with the bat. And the senior and MKTV co-leader will be over at first base right there, simply scaring the pitcher into delivering 4 straight balls. And now back to the top of the batting order, Jake Randino, the sophomore. We'll see if Barada has provided the spark for an MKA flurry of runs. Still locked at that 0-0 tally as of right now, but can Randino get off a beautiful hit? Ultimately, a little bit too late, I believe, and so that one in there for the 1-1 count at the middle school. The downpour expiring somewhat, still a light little trickle as the ball in the process to make it 2-1. Still Barada nagging the Minutemen over at first base. We'll see if Randino can continue to set the sails for MKA as Barada forced to dive back to first. But it is too easy for MKTV's very own right there. And so able to withstand the pitcher's accusation. Still 2-1 the count. To summon something brilliant here. That one very close to Randino. Barada trying to steal second, and he's got it. Elliot Barada, absolutely brilliant. Amazing baseball IQ pose right there from MKTV's very own. And it's too easy for Elliot Barada, stealing second without any question about it. And just like that, ducks on a pond for MKA. Off to the races. Barada getting on his horse and galloping over to the midway base right there. Something else from the senior. And so Elliot Barada, can he be the man to initiate something spectacular for MKA? Their first run, Rendino still operating out of the plate, and so sent his bat away right there. You might have thought that that was the fourth needed ball. And so instead, 3-2, the full count working against Rendino. Barada was able to prevail off the full count. Rendino can do the same here. It's a very high hit, heading towards the second baseman, shortstop. Barada trying to scramble back, and he's safe. And Barada still absolutely brilliant in order to maintain his presence around the bases down yonder. Nonetheless, Rendino not as fortunate, and that ball caught yet again by the shortstop. He certainly had his work cut out for him over the match's durations. And so 2 outs now for Newark Academy as Barada, the next to operate out of home plate. And Barada, the only one to have found success of such in this bottom of the third inning. So we'll see if Barada can recapitulate. 1-0 the count. That one a little bit too down low to make it 2-0. And so we'll see if the pitcher's momentum, who certainly has been firing from all cylinders for Newark Academy over the first 2 innings, we'll see if his form is subsiding ever so slightly as Barada oversees the third straight ball. And so quite the service it would do for the Cougars. Men on second and first. So far just Barada, courtesy of a brilliant performance thus far. And he knew MKTV's cameras were rolling. That's why he wanted to show off something magical for us all. So 3-1 the count in the process. Able to get something going from the mound. Still only 1 out needed to see through the third inning. Some work cut out for him as Barada over to the pitcher. He'll only jog over to first, knowing that that will be the third out upon the catch of the first baseman to see through any MKA response. So still remaining at a fixed 0-0 as we head into the middle inning. And so a change in pitching personnel to start out the fourth inning. So Jack Amarada on his senior day, he will retire over to first base. And meanwhile, it is Alessandro Rizzio, who you could see before warming up over beyond left field, or at least I could see him warming up. He will now be MKA's second pitcher of the day, and so retiring a mixed bag of a pitching performance for Jack Amarada. Of course, he could do much better than me. I don't even play baseball, or I also just lack such a sense of the game, too. So I'm trying my best as commentator as of right now as the 2-0 count is underway. As the very high-flying hit right there over towards left field to be not caught by Quinn Carlesimo. And so a blunder from the shortstop is able to concede first base for Newark Academy. And that right there, not the most fortunate of plays from MKA. Perhaps a bit of a miscommunication between Nolan Jives operating out of third base and Carlesimo, but a bit of a blunder right there nonetheless, and what could have just so easily been the first out for MKA. The Cougars will still have to wait for it, and you could see Carlesimo patting his chest right there, taking the blame for that one. And so now Rizzio, without the work helping him that he may have thought could have assisted him that first out for MKA, he'll still have to conjure up three more from the mound. Meanwhile, Minuteman over at first. So no outs working against the visitors. The 0-1 count for Rizzio in his first series of pitches of the morning. Meanwhile, you could see Brooks Barrett, the sophomore, working outside of left field. And so it was a similar situation last time out against West Orange. It was Ben Ottner who oversaw a rather omnipotent pitching performance over, I believe, the first 5 innings before Zach Goyle came into play as another heavy hit in the process to be caught this time by Carlesimo. He's got it. And so the sophomore able to find more success on that play. And MKA, at long last, finding their first out of the middle inning. Trying to play defense here. Meanwhile, as our camera sort of lingers down in terms of battery, the prospects, I believe, that we may not be able to cover this full game. We'll try to bring you as much as possible, that's for sure. And so 1 strike underway from Rizzio, as he yet again tosses over to first. And so, need to remind, last time out against West Orange, it was Ottner, quite the pitching display, over then to Zach Goyle, who's able to compound, and then Brooks Barrett, the sophomore, with one of his first pitching performances of the campaign, and it certainly found itself towards the final fixtures of the 2023 campaign. Need I remind you, I believe the record is 9-14 for MKA, but that certainly also reflects the quite difficult set of opponents that the Cougars have ventured across in this SEC Liberty Division. It was not too long ago that they had to play against Governor Livingston, who I believe is a top 10 team in the state. As Banner asked for some rest as of right now, still the opportunity lingering for Rizzio to get in that second out of the top of the fourth. Rizzio through, grounded over to Carlesimo, the toss over to first, and it's a double play from MKA to see through the top of the fourth inning. Absolutely brilliant from the field. And we'll go ahead to the second half of the ball game here. The score is still 0-0. overweight to the bottom of the fourth inning, and along with it, the second half of the ball game, the opportunity still withstanding for the Cougars to get on the board first in the matchup against Newark Academy on this coveted senior day today. Over here at the middle school, weather slowly but surely becoming a bit more favorable. A very scarce trickle. Meanwhile, a bit of a warmer temperature here. Skies lightening, but still remaining a bit of a grayish white. Meanwhile, back out on the field, instead of my weather reports, 2-0 the count, working against Quinn Carlesimo, the next at-bat for MKA. Able to see through 3-0. And so still maintaining that same pitching presence, Newark Academy. We'll see if there's a let-up to his fiery start to life here at the middle school before he conjures up 4 straight balls. And so just like that, the easy walk for Carlesimo over to first base. And so the sophomore will find his presence over there. Next up, Alessandro Rizzio, who's found his pitching services recently called up for the Cougars and able to deliver a decent fourth inning display. Really was that double play right there to retire at the top of the fourth inning that marked MKA's defensive triumph that has certainly evidenced itself time and time again throughout the matchup here, that's for sure. And obviously evidenced by the scoreboard itself, 0-0. And so not the best day for batters here at the middle school. Meanwhile, 0-1 the count. Working against Rizzio, that one just about in there to be 0-2. So regardless of swing or no swing from the sophomore, still the opportunity to get the first out for Newark Academy. Right here, that one. A very beautiful swing. And heading clear. Not quite. And so ultimately, in for the ground rule double. And so it looked to be a game of fine margins. That's for sure. Rizzio's swing almost able to beat the better of the fence right there and head over, not quite, but it will be the sophomore venturing over to second base. Meanwhile, Carlesimo over at third. So the opportunity's prime for MKA to, at long last, get the run that was 4 innings in the making. No man has ventured over to third for either of the two sides over the course of this entire matchup. And now 2 ducks on a pond for MKA. It is simply now or never for the Cougars on their senior day matchup against their Minutemen rivals to strike first here. Next up, of course, is Eli Solomon, and if there is any man to see through the scoring potential for the hosting Cougars here today, it is the junior himself. Has had a number of decorated hits over the course of the season. 2-0, but that one a swing and a miss to make it 2-1. Still no outs working against the Cougars. And so if they are to strike, now is the time to do so. And so can it be Solomon to see through what could be the start of something brilliant for MKA on their senior day? It's a heavy hit over to left field. The ground rule double in the process, and MKA able to put 2 on the board, and they will strike first on this senior day matchup. Eli Solomon with an incredible hit, and it's back-to-back ground rule doubles to see through the 2-0 tally for MKA. Not an out to work against them. And the junior Eli Solomon right there, you may have predicted before. I certainly did so. He has the heavy hitting potential to start the scoring sheet for MKA, and he just so delivered right there. Absolutely brilliant for the Cougars as they see through the 2-0 lead right here. Meanwhile, Solomon just on second in a meeting at the mound at the process that could just well mark the final pitch for the go-to for the Minutemen. Now he will stay there, as a matter of fact. And so, at long last, Newark Academy conceding the first batch of runs of the ball game, and it was the run. Or 2 runs, as a matter of fact, 4 innings in the making. So meanwhile, Josh Katz will be the pinch runner for Eli Solomon, and he'll be cheating off of second base right there. Meanwhile, Nick Lembo to pick up where Solomon left off, at least hopefully, from our vantage point, swing and a miss. So 0-1, still no outs working against them. But that was just what the doctor ordered for MKA. Eli Solomon with an amazing hit right there. Yet again, I would argue, a little unfortunate that that did not carry the distance to even go over the fence to make it 3-0 for the Cougars. They will still be grateful for the 2-run advantage as Lembo able to get some contact off that one, so biting not enough. 1 and 2. Will it be at long last the opportunity for the Minutemen to get through their first out of the morning? That one, not quite. 2 and 2. And so MKA lingering at the at-bat, nagging at Newark Academy. They were silenced over the first 3 innings, but things seemingly just have clicked over the early duration of the bottom of the 4th, as that one, not enough. And so a full count favoring the likes of Lembo. On the at-bat right here, another fellow heavy hitter. Can it be more of the same for MKA? The circumstances favoring them over the course of this middle inning, as that one, not enough. And Lembo charts on over to first base. And it's full steam ahead for MKA as Nolan Drives sees forth his second at-bat of the morning. Can it be the opportunity for an even further scoring run for the Cougars? Still no outs working against them as the weather clears up at the middle school. So could the fortunes nonetheless. 1 strike already working against the junior at home plate right here. So what was at one point defensive triumph for the visiting Minutemen absolutely interrupted by one single play from Solomon. But meanwhile, a very high-hitting ball right there over towards center field to be caught. Room for the double play. Not able to do so. And it is Josh Katz scrambling over to third base, and he will claim it in the process. And so, at long last for the Minutemen, able to summon in 1 out. Still will need 2 more where that came from. Nonetheless, Lembo operating on first and Katz operating on third, the pinch runner. Meanwhile, our battery not allowing us too much time left. And so we'll see how much more of the ball game we can deliver for you here. Hopefully MKA can summon in many more runs to make this a mercy roll. That's certainly wishful thinking, first off, but second off, that would definitely relieve the burden of the fact that we have a rather improvised setup in light of the Saturday fixture. As the hit right there from Ottner. Katz over to home, and he's safe. Lembo over to third, he'll also be safe. And MKA able to get in their third run right there. Josh Katz, the pinch runner, off to the races and able to evade the catch made by the catcher. He wasn't on home plate, and Katz able to simply scramble right past him and able to see the light of home plate to make it 3 for MKA. And the opportunities absolutely exploding for the Cougars on this bottom of the 4th inning on this senior day matchup. Truly spectacular for the Cougars. Meanwhile, Lembo nearing home stretch, and it's Elliot Barada yet again at home plate. That one overcooked for the ball. And so can it be Elliot Barada, MKA TV's very own, who had an amazing at-bat last time out, I believe in the 3rd inning, who can keep the dice rolling for MKA? Already, Ottner over to second to increase the real estate property of the Cougars over around the bases. So 3rd and 2nd occupied by MKA. The circumstances prime for an Elliot Barada swamp donkey right here. That one in there for the strike. No, not quite in there for the ball. And so this is why I don't trust my own judgment when it comes to baseball. 2-0 the count. Could it just be the walk to render loaded bases for MKA? As Lembo cheers on his fellow senior teammate, takes a swing at that one, Barada. Well, actually not quite. There will be the ruling that that was a ball. And so we'll gladly take that. 3-0 the count. Quite favoring Barada right here. That one in there for the strike in the process. So some say lingering from the trusted pitcher of Newark Academy, finding his long presence over the course of 4 innings of action here. That one, not quite, and loaded bases for MKA. Elliot Barada yet again walked on over to first, and it's truly magical from the senior and MKTV co-leader right there. And continuing to deliver, the Cougars loaded bases and already putting up 3 at the bottom of the 4th inning. Quite the something else. It was an absolute stalemate heading into this period. this inning. Oh goodness, this is where the hockey terminology comes in. But nonetheless, a clean slate of a scoreline, 0-0, constantly ordaining the first half of the matchup. And now when we've gotten to the bottom of the fourth inning, already finding 3, the Cougars now occupy loaded bases and only 1 out working against them. Everything seemingly coming to a standstill here for the Cougars, simply drawing a line in the sand, I would argue, and stating that now is the time to deliver on this Senior Day matchup. Need I remind you, the seniors that we will be honoring today: Elliot Barada, Max Nussbaum, Julian Caviello, Nick Lembo, and Jack Amarada. Those are the 5 who are to be cherished here today. Well, cherished every day, but worthy of special mentioning here today over their 4 years of service for the baseball program. And so, meeting at the mound for Newark Academy, and they will seem to, at long last, bring in the services of a new pitcher right there. You could see amidst the thick of players in black. Looks to be number 5 right there. At the red turfed mound, he is the one who may just well be delving in pitches for the remainder of the morning matchup here at the middle school. Weather's certainly beginning to favor us ever so slightly. Still not by any means a chilly day. It's the perfect temperature, I would say, for a baseball game. Not the perfect weather, but the perfect temperature. And you can tell it's the perfect temperature because you can't tell whether you should have an iced coffee or a hot coffee. And I know I surely said that for, I believe, a softball broadcast, but I like to repeat that quote because I think it's very true. And so, players dispersing to their respective positions on the field. Need I remind you, 1 out working against the Cougars, loaded bases for MKA, and a new pitcher occupying the Minutemen's ranks. The opportunities prime for something miraculous, for the increased onslaught of runs for the hosting MKA side here today. And who else to spearhead such efforts than Jake Randino, recycling it back to the top of the batting order as our battery seems destined to expire over the coming minutes. Randino, can he see through something brilliant here? Over to second, able to get it to first. And Newark Academy able to decipher quite the menacing situation right there. The double play amidst loaded bases to see through the 4th inning. So back to the top of the 5th. MKA nonetheless holding the 3-0 lead. We will see how much more of the baseball game we can offer up for you here amidst our dying camera. So you have been warned about the perhaps sudden abrupt ending that may be in store. Of course, our apologies for any of the such. This was quite the improvised last-minute setup to bring to you Senior Day action. In fact, that's a funny story. It was only about 20 minutes before the game that I was rushed over to the dugout where Elliot Barada, who's put up an amazing baseballing performance thus far, he quickly created the stream for this game as a matter of fact. So that's how the stream even popped up on the software in the first place. Our ranks over at the club simply scrambling to deliver what could be at least 5/7 of the matchup here. So we'll see how much more is in store. And so to start out the top of the 5th inning, or at least how much of such we can cover, it is Alessandro Rizzio continuing his presence at the mound right here, picking up where he left off at the top of the 4th. And so retiring the likes of Jack Amarada over to first base, that one in there for the first ball. Meanwhile, as the hit over to Randino, easily confiscated by the sophomore. And so 2 more, please, MKA will be asking. Just right there. And so, need I remind you, top of the 5th, 1 out in the process, 3-0. The Cougars with quite the sudden lead accrued over the simply interrupted by a barrage, an avalanche of runs scored by the Cougars. And so they did seem destined for increasing ever so more. Loaded bases with only 1 out working against them, but credit where it's due to Newark Academy to decipher the situation, navigate through it. So the double play to retire the bottom of the 4th inning nonetheless. We'll see if MKA can reconvene with quite the circumstances to pile on the runs here as Rizzo looks to play some defense. 1-1 the count. So 1 ball, 1 strike, and 1 out. Assisting the Cougars' likes as Rizzo operates yet again. That one. Another heavy hit. Looks to be infield to be caught by Nick Lembo. And now 2 outs. Summoned from the Cougars' ranks. 1 more where that came from. And so, continuing success on the defense. We'll see if they can usher in a relatively quick defensive stance at the top of the 5th. On this, surprisingly now, gorgeous Saturday morning, I would say the atmosphere prime. I would say luscious green from the trees surrounding us. As the 3rd, ground right there, over to Carlesimo, over to Amarata. And a very quick defensive triumph at the top of the 5th inning for the Cougars. Playing like it's their senior day, they'll be gripping the bat yet again at the bottom of the 5th. As our battery warns us of very, very little time remaining. It seems to be quite the opposite for MKA to strike first, already finding that 3-run lead as Jack Amarata has sights to pick up where the Cougars left off. So things absolutely exploding at the bottom of the 4th. An absolute stalemate interrupted by 3 runs accrued for the Cougars to make it 3-0. And perhaps lucky for the Minutemen that it wasn't even more after their double play to see through the middle inning. But nonetheless, Jack Amarata, the storied hitter, as well as pitcher to keep the dice rolling for MKA. Nonetheless, 2 straight foul balls to make it 0-2 the count. So 3-0 scoreline, bottom of the 5th. We'll see how much more baseball action we can present to you here in light of the battery and limitations on our camera. Nonetheless, Amarata in there for the foul ball ultimately. And so the senior will have to wait before he could rush on over to first, if not more. But Amarata with quite the storied success of a final campaign in servitude for the Cougars. He could be just about a candidate for MVP of the season, especially in light of some other injuries that MKA has accrued. Previously, Alessandro Rizzo unable to feature at the mound. Same thing with Max Nussbaum for the entirety of the season. The Clark commit. And so 1 of 3 as of right now. College commits for MKA's ranks. Jack Amarata, obviously you have over to, well, first off, Jack Amarata with an amazing hit right there, down right field. And Amarata off to the races over to second. Brilliantly done by the senior. And Jack Amarata, right as I was calling his name, able to deliver quite brilliantly for MKA. Catching me mid-sentence right there, but catching that ball with no hesitation. A beautiful, pristine piece of contact right there to escape the likes of the right outfielder and then sprinting across. Halfway to completing his journey now, lingering over at second, and so ducks on a pond in this bottom of the fifth inning for MKA. We'll see how much more of a cry can be said as he high-fives the shortstop right there. Not sure why you'd be high-fiving your rival. You just scored quite the hit on you guys, but nonetheless, some sportsmanship to be evidenced. And so next up, Quinn Carlesimo, as his bat flies over to the dugout for MKA. And that right there is why we have netting. That was something else right there. And so, gladly, no one was harmed in the swinging of that ball. That was a strike right there ultimately. And so the ball heading in one direction, but the bat completely flying in the other. And so gladly everyone is okay. There's a net right there. Meanwhile, Amarata over to third. And Jack Amarata will be safe ultimately. And so now nearing the home stretch, the senior seemingly one sprint away from making it 4 for the Cougars. Still 1 ball and 1 strike operating against Quinn Carlesimo. And so MKA, can they continue to put pedal to the metal to increase their tally of runs? That one a bit too much for the box against Quinn Carlesimo to make it 2-1 the count. And so Carlesimo will hope he can do a better job of holding on to the bat this time while also swinging all the way through to see through what could be more for the Cougars. That one not quite in the offing. And so the opportunity now, 3-1. Could be walked off over to first. The opportunities remaining present for MKA to increase their favorable outlook on the scoreline. That one, not enough. And so Carlesimo will be walked on over to first. And it's full steam ahead for the Cougars. Next up, Alessandro Rizzio. Currently the pitcher will now be withstanding the other side of those throws from the mound. As he gets set right here, it will be the sophomore. The opportunity to keep the dice rolling in MKA's favor. Still quite the task away from a mercy roll, but we'll see if they can occupy quite the sizable margin to distance themselves from the still prevalent bagel on the scoreline for Newark Academy. Still no outs working against the Cougars, so the opportunity now more than ever before to increase the deficit that they're burying their rivals under as of right now. Still the strike found in the process from the new pitcher for the Minutemen's ranks. Meanwhile, over to second. Not even having to dive for it right there. Quinn Carlesimo able to better profit his outlook on the bases. So 2 ducks on a pond for MKA, staring down the throats of the Minutemen. 1-1. Snake Eyes working against Rizzio. The pitch in there. Well, a game of fine margins right there. The judgment call certainly could have been made for either or, and so the ball ultimately prevailing. 2-1, the count working against Rizzio. And so MKA absolutely silenced by the Minutemen, but now operating out of our second battery pack, we'll try to squeeze out a few more minutes of action here at the middle school. And so right there, the rambunctious hit from Eli Solomon yet again, increasing the favorable circumstances for the Cougars. Now up 5-0 at this bottom of the fifth. And so we still won't be offering you too much longer, perhaps if at best a few more minutes of action here in the fifth inning. Nonetheless, the hit from Lembo will be caught out in his rush over to first. And so what you may have missed right there, Eli Solomon with an amazing hit down left field, unable to be caught by the left outfielder, able to get runs 4 and 5 in there for MKA. So the circumstances now, 2 outs working against them, man on third, and 5-0 is the tally here at the middle school senior day matchup, as that one swing and a miss from Nolan Jives. He's the next up at bat. And so the opportunity at long last for the Minutemen to see through what has been a very long, dragged bottom of the fifth inning. That one, not enough. Actually, will be enough. That's why I don't trust my judgment call. So 0-2 the count. And at long last, after very long fourth and fifth innings, we'll see if the Minutemen can close it through. Amidst the man on third will be the strikeout against Nolan Jives. And the Minutemen, at long last, will find themselves at the offensive helm to start out the top of the sixth. So now to start the top of the sixth inning, getting in towards the final stages of the matchup here at the middle school, MKA picking up where they left off at the bottom of the fifth. Found 3 at the bottom of the fourth and make it 2 more for the Cougars to start out the fifth inning, and then in the sixth inning as well, able to get in the quick, easily collected first out. 2 more, please. MKA will be asking. Alessandro Rizzio, meanwhile, the sophomore, continuing to operate out of the mound right now on behalf of the men in white right here on what could just well be a very fine senior day for the Cougars, spreading the love for the 4 seniors currently healthy and eligible to play. Nussbaum, meanwhile, perhaps relegated to the duty of operating the scoreboard, but in light of some of my complaints, he's done a poor job at such. Nonetheless, the Minutemen able to allocate a man on first base in the process. And so, able to at least ravage through and find some success in light of the unfavorable circumstances. Down 5 now in what was otherwise a relatively stalemate of a matchup over the first half of action. And of course, right into the second half upon the beginning of that bottom of the fourth. Things just seemingly started to click for the Cougars, and that click may have just well been Eli Solomon right there. 2 amazing, very clutch hits on behalf of the Cougars, both of which were able to find 2 runs for MKA respectively. And perhaps deja vu right there. I know you all missed the second hit from Eli Solomon, but nonetheless, in back-to-back innings, Solomon with large, heavy hits down to, I believe, both instances left field to keep the scoring going for MKA, as the run right there may have just well been prevented, able to at least get that second out. And nonetheless, over here at the middle school, the downpour is now picking up. Perhaps I jinxed it when I was saying before that the weather was looking a bit more favorable. Now down and heavier than ever before. The rain with no let-up in sight, certainly making its presence known. Nonetheless, Rizzio, he's making his presence known right there. Already 2 outs to make it 3. Nick Lembo And MKA with defensive triumph yet again to be grabbing the bat at the bottom of the 6th. Well, as the rain only picks up here in Montclair, MKA only picks up in terms of runs and offensive tempo. As right there, already off to a mad dash to start out the bottom of the 6th. Ultimately caught, however, did look to be Ben Ottner silenced on that front. And so MKA, they'll have to wait a bit longer in order to populate the bases. Next up, for what I do believe is the first time in this matchup, it is Julian Caviello. And so Caviello, he has acted as a pinch runner before over the season, was operating out of left field for the entirety of the matchup, and now all of a sudden also working with the bat in his hands. And so we'll see what Caviello, for the first time today, is my teammate over in boys soccer over in the fall. He also is the Dartmouth football commit. And so not every day you see the D1 football player not even playing in high school. So that's quite a testament right there. And I do like to flex that I did play alongside. I had a teammate in a D1 football player, even if I never played football myself either. So Caviello, he's the next up at bat. As Nussbaum, where are you? He looks to be falling asleep at the controls of the scoreboard. Perhaps he might not actually be the one operating the scoreboard today. He could find some respite in light of the fact that it is senior day, so maybe somebody else can do it, like an underclassman. Nonetheless, the rain only getting worse here at the middle school. And so Caviello, amidst the thick of the torrential downpour, will see what he can conjure up for the Cougars. 3 found at the bottom of the 4th, and 2 more found at the bottom of the 5th. So now 1 and 2 the count, working against Caviello as he takes a hit down towards the fence. Foul ball still lingering around at home plate. Room for something special from the senior. 1 out to work against the Cougars. Depopulated bases as of right now as we enter the final stages of the matchup. Caviello with the swing down to the shortstop, throws over, will catch him out. And 2 outs found for the traveling Minutemen here today. They'll need 1 more where that came from, obviously. And so Caviello with quite the sprint over there, and certainly did exercise a bit more of an urgent course of action from the Minutemen right there, perhaps why he's also operated as a pinch runner over the course of the season too. Certainly does possess a pair of wheels, and I've certainly seen that firsthand over the course of his soccer career with MKA. Always great to feature alongside him in the boys soccer defense. in our initiatives to secure the SEC Liberty Division title. Meanwhile, MKA baseball, not with similar success. They currently reside in last place in the division, but certainly a tough division, especially in terms of baseball. A number of baseball heavyweights possessed by the Super Essex Conference. Nonetheless, quite the feat it would be for the Cougars to defeat the Minutemen here today, and certainly full steam ahead for such, as it does look to be Rendino operating at the bat right there. So it looked to be Coviello working on the at-bat instead of Elliot Barada, and so I'm a little annoyed by that. Nonetheless, recycling it back to the top of the batting order, as I keep using the word nonetheless. It's suddenly entered my vocabulary. So 2-1 the count, the rain getting worse than ever before. And so, as the water buffets everybody, a full count and the opportunity for one last strike to see through the 6th inning. Not enough to warrant it. Looks to be deemed a foul ball off Rendino's swing, so he will live to see the sight of another pitch. Nonetheless, the Minutemen simply aching for one last chance to be swinging at the ball here. At the bottom of the 6th, that one in a ball. And so Rendino allotted over towards first base. The pitcher cannot prevail in the sticky situation to, at long last, see through the top of the 6th. And so next up, of course, Jack Amarada to keep the dream alive for MKA. Well, the dream is certainly being realized right now, still up 5-0. And of course, they would not even have to see the bottom of the 7th to ensure victory if the Minutemen can be silenced one final time. And of course, quite the claim it would be, even in the high school iteration of baseball, where it's usually very high scoring, or at least where both teams are usually able to strike and put up at least 1 or 2 runs. So quite the opportunity it would be for the Cougars to keep the clean sheet against the visiting Minutemen here today on this senior day, of course, as Rendino off to second base will be safe in the process. And so the sophomore right there able to successfully scramble to the halfway point in his journey towards home plate. And so well done by Rendino. Quite the sprint by the sophomore. And so over for Amarada, 2-1 the count. Still 2 outs in the process, nagging over the heads of the Minutemen. Meanwhile, 3-1. And so the pitcher simply unable to close in on the end of the 6th inning. The heavy rain only making its presence further known here for you all. That one, enough to send Amarada over to first in the process. And so all of a sudden, what could have just been one pitch away from seeing through the 6th inning, now all of a sudden Rendino on second and Amarada on first. And MKA pitching what at one point seemed to be an improbable presence over across the bases, as a meeting in the mound is in the offing for the Minutemen. Well, rain picking up and the chills picking up as well. Not the finest weather day, but certainly a pretty sight. You know, you have the atmospheric gray and white. You have the luscious green trees over here on Central and across the middle school campus. Behind the camera, you could see a nice, pretty view of the hill, upper mountain right there with towering green trees right there. So good coffee shop atmosphere, I would say, but this isn't a coffee shop. This is a baseball game, and now 0-2. Not to mention, this is senior day after all. So 0-2 now, the opportunity at long last yet again for Newark Academy to get in one last strike to see through the 6th inning. Not found right there, as Quinn Carlesimo, the sophomore, yet again finds his presence over at home plate. 1-2 the count. Still 2 outs in the process. Bottom of the 6th, 5-0 the Cougars. A heavy swing to postpone his dismissal from the plate just yet. And so MKA with quite the good day in the office. It was a deadlock, need I remind you, for much of the matchup until things just about exploded at the bottom of the fourth. And now trying to increase such a tally, Carlesimo takes a swing to it, back-to-back. Foul balls colliding off the roof of the fencing right there, keeping the sophomore's presence over at the at-bat. Still nagging over the heads of the traveling Minutemen. Simply one pitch away from seeing through the sixth inning. A heavy hit found. Going to be caught by the Minutemen. And at long last, Newark Academy will see through one final chance at the top of the final seventh inning. So now to start out one last inning, one last chance for the Newark Academy Minutemen. It will be Brooks Barrett, the sophomore, delving out the pitches here from the mound, and already it's a high-flying hit to be collected by anyone, ultimately out for the foul ball over into the empty tennis courts, thankfully empty. Wouldn't want a tennis player getting hit by that, and so 0-1 the count to start off, but it is Brooks Barrett to oversee one final defensive stance for the Cougars. They've been able to secure the clean sheet across 6 straight innings. Quite the impressive feat right there, as the second foul ball in a similar spot is found to make it 0-2. And so MKA, can they keep it perfect? Can they keep together the bagel on the scoreboard for Newark Academy to silence them across 7 innings straight? The opportunity at hand right here for Brooks Barrett to see it through. Of course, it is the process of both Jack Amorata as well as Alessandro Rizzio's bidding, and so will it be up to the sophomore to finalize the deal here? Or will the Minutemen, amidst the torrential downpour and amidst the slightest of chances, conjure up the much-needed comeback against their rivals? Of course, it is MKA's senior day, and giving them perhaps added momentum, added tenacity in their bid to find 10 wins on the season to secure victory against their arch rivals Newark Academy and to honor their seniors in no better way amidst the thick of the pouring rain. 1-2 the count. That one in there, unable to be caught by Barrett. Taken by Rizzio over to Amarada. And not quite sure what that one would entail. I do believe runner will stay on first for Newark Academy. And so the Minutemen able to find a lingering presence against all odds. They're battling away to try to bridge the 5-run gap between them and the Cougars. So man on first. Still fresh count right here, no outs. MKA with the 5-0 lead at the top of the 7th and final inning here at the middle school. Meanwhile, Barrett already able to offer up a strike. Can he summon up 2 more where that came from? In there, not quite, trying to steal second. He's safe. And quite the narrow call right there. I thought for sure Rizzio, to be honest, caught it before the runner could occupy second, but umpire thinks otherwise. And so we'll try to not argue with that call. 1-1 the count in the process. Still in need of all 3 outs, but nonetheless, the Minutemen trying to vie away, trying to chip away at the mountain of a deficit that they're going to have to overcome right here. In a rainy Saturday morning at the middle school. Of course, a rainy Saturday morning, perhaps the prime sort of weather to sleep in on your weekend. Nonetheless, MKA, they've been thoroughly awakened and resurrected into an amazing performance thus far as they look to secure a clean sheet victory over Newark Academy. Meanwhile, Barrett able to exercise in the second strike, so 1-2 the count as Barrett tries to summon in the first out of the final inning. And so it's last chance, Newark Academy, against their rivals to play spoils on their senior day. To look behind me, softball did find their senior day spoiled amidst a Bloomfield omnipotent display. I believe the final score of that one was 17-5. The highlight of that game was Alex Berra, however, on her senior day, finding the home run. And so, meanwhile, back out on the baseball field, the walk on over to first. And so now first and second occupied for Newark Academy, not an out to show as a response for the Cougars. Can Newark Academy conjure up against all odds something special as already trying to yet again silence the runner, etching off of second, unable to do so. And still a lingering presence still remains for Newark Academy. Men on first and second, no outs in the process. Still a 5-run lead being defended by MKA. In one final inning, Newark Academy giving it everything they've got in order to try to chip away against all odds the seemingly potent lead of MKA. Barrett yet again firing. That one in there for the foul ball yet again. And so it has seemed to have gotten to that situation multiple times already in this final 7th inning, that of forcing a number of misfired foul balls, Barrett. But it is one last hit that's enough to buy them enough time to rush on over to first. And so 1-1 the count. Yeah, again, snake eyes, as I always like to deem it. Barrett delivering away that one. Not in there. A little bit too awry to the left, so now 2-1 the count. MKA just in need of one last defensive stance. Nonetheless, 3-1. The count working against the sophomore at the mound. Can it be one final statement from Newark Academy? It does seem improbable, if not impossible, that of overcoming the deficit. But now, all of a sudden, loaded bases for Newark Academy and not a single out to show for any response from MKA. Full sights ahead for what just could be. You might be calling into question the comeback from Newark Academy. Still seems to be a mile away. Still 5 runs needed to be overcome. But all it takes is one pristine hit from the Minutemen to see through 4 runs. Now off the situation, still no outs, aiding MKA. So now a meeting at the mound as the rain still worsens its presence here at the middle school. And you can simply tell the Cougars out on the field as they let up more valuable real estate across the bases. They simply want this game to be over. They want to secure that 10th victory on the season, to secure a senior day dub as well against their rivals, but they're going to need to conjure up 3 pitches against all 3 outs, against all odds if they are to see it through. Newark Academy mounting a very sizable last stance as yet again players meet with Barrett at the mound. He could be sent off, yes. And it is Alessandro Rizzio who will be the pitcher for the rest of the 7th inning. And so Barrett's day at the mound, very, very short-lived for the sophomore. He went in to start out the final 7th inning, did not summon an out, but did allow loaded bases for Newark Academy. And that right there has been deemed enough from Coach Ralph Pacifico to send in Alessandro Rizzio. Yet again today, we did see Rizzio feature in the middle innings as of the 6th. And now, yet again, he's going to be called up for one last stand for MKA. But all of a sudden, the situation has greatly changed and accrued towards Newark Academy's liking. Still down 5, but loaded bases, and still much more work needed to be done for MKA to stave off the threat and to maintain the clean sheet too. For Rizzio now, yet again being called into action. Swing and a miss off his first pitch right there. The trusted glove of Rizzio evidencing itself yet again right there. 1-1 the count. Loaded bases for Newark Academy. That one not in there enough. So 2-1 against Rizzio. And so very unfortunate for Barrett as he's now occupying second baseman position. Not able to see a full inning. So 2-2 now in the process for Rizzio. And so not the finest performance from Barrett, but certainly called into not the finest of situations, simply able to call in one last inning. As Newark Academy, certainly you may be sensing, trigger happy to try to increase their prospects. So not the finest of circumstances that the underclassmen had to be called up to. And yet again, it will be Rizzio, who featured earlier on in this matchup, the opportunity to, at long last, seize the first out for MKA in one last defensive stance, unable to do so. And now full count for Newark Academy. Even a walk would be enough to find their first run of the morning. Now, what can be drawn together right here? It is the perfect last stand thus far from Newark Academy. And you certainly may have sensed MKA with quick sights to once more work off any lingering Minuteman threat. All of a sudden, loaded bases and the opportunity for a walk to see through their first run. Sights for a clean sheet could just be spoiled right here as that one not enough. And Newark Academy is able to get a run on the board in the final inning of play. Still no outs working against them and loaded bases for the Minutemen. They are a grand slam away from tying things here at the middle school. And the seeming idea of tying the scoreline here seems simply improbable. Heading into the top of the 7th inning, up 5 MKA. All of a sudden, it's a completely different ball game now as the hit right there. What's up? Yeah, I'm cold. Well, I just yelled to Rendina right there. He asked me if I was cold. Yes, I'm very cold. I'm very cold. I'm wearing a very light rain jacket right here. So 0-1 the count. That one not enough. 1-1 in the process. And so MKA still without an out. Newark Academy against all odds, mounting together some sort of response in this final inning. Still loaded bases, trying to play spoils to their rival senior day. That one in there for the hit. Trying to rush off to second, and they'll find it and make it 2 runs for Newark Academy. Still no outs working against them, and loaded bases yet again for the Minutemen. Cutting MKA's lead from 5-3. Now the score is 5-2 as Rizzio meets with Amarata, the more experienced pitcher, obviously. Not to say anything against Rizzio, but sophomore meeting with the senior. And so still 3 outs needed for MKA. The circumstances remaining the same as always, but now all 3 bases occupied and 2 runs already found for the Minutemen. MKA now all of a sudden in a much more uncomfortable situation to defend their senior day victory that seemed to be within arm's grasp before. Now all of a sudden hanging ever so more in the question of the balance as 1-1. The count right here in need of all 3 outs while all 3 bases are loaded. Who will strike first? The opportunity to now seize the lead off a grand slam right here, but it is a grand slam, so much to be asked for, obviously. 1-2 the count. Ken Rizzio at long last summon in the first out of the top of the 7th. It's a monumental last stand from the Minutemen as a hit right there postpones the dismissal from the at-bat. So 1-2 still remaining the count. The Minutemen against all odds keeping their presence on the field. As the rain continues to head downwards, the Minutemen trying to chew away at it. That one ultimately out for the foul ball. And so keeping his presence at the plate. The count 1-2. 5-2 is the tally at this top of the 7th. One last chance for Newark Academy. I cannot stress enough what could have just easily been another quick-sighted defensive effort from the Cougars, all of a sudden completely interrupted by 2 runs found by Newark Academy and loaded bases in the process as the ball to make it 2-2. Newark Academy, they're biting back at their deficit. They're already close to having it, and still without an out to detest or deter them. The momentum may be accruing with the visitors' hands in this senior day matchup for MKA amidst the thick of the rain. A swing and a miss, and at long last for MKA, able to summon through the first out. Alessandro Rizzio called back from his pitcher's retirement over the unfortunate circumstances of the 7th inning, but he's been called up to action yet again, the sophomore, and at long last able to deliver for the Cougars. 5-2, still the worrying tally, but at long last they have an out to show for their defensive efforts. 2 more where that came from for MKA to see off a rivalry victory to celebrate their senior day against Newark Academy. Still bases loaded for the Minutemen. A high-flying swing, but not the needed contact. 0-1 the count. Well, what would have just easily been, what could have been, the quick and easy 3 more outs summoned by MKA, all of a sudden reversed to make it all the more exciting. One last stance for Newark Academy. The dramatic one final inning between the 2 sides, 1-1. They count now in the offing. Still 1 out to at least aid MKA, still loaded bases. As the next one offered up by Rizzio, that one not enough to make it 2-1. And so quite the hurdle needed for MKA to overcome to see the light of victory here today. Still firmly within a grasp, within a sprint for the Cougars. Nonetheless, Newark Academy putting up quite the battle for MKA to overcome. As 2-2 the tally nonetheless. Rizzio, can he get at long last the second out for the Cougars to at long last see through this senior day matchup? Not enough to make it full count. So now the circumstances all the more interesting. 1 strike away from seeing that coveted second out, or 1 ball away from making it a 3rd run for Newark Academy. Takes a hit down it, ultimately a foul ball. And so maintaining his presence over at home plate. No one may have suspected that the game could have gotten this narrow into this late a matchup. Newark Academy absolutely silenced by the Cougars time and time again throughout the matchup. And now, seemingly when it all that matters most, that one enough to walk the man over to first. And now the tally is 5-3. 3 runs put up by Newark Academy in 1 valiant final stance of the final 7th inning. And now a meeting at the mound for Alessandro Rizzio. The circumstances only getting gloomier as the weather only worsens here at the middle school. At one point, an omnipotent 5-0 tally, which was in need of defense one last time. It all of a sudden is being troubled and challenged amidst the high-flying efforts of the visiting Minutemen. Against their rivals here today, they've chipped their lead down to 2. So 5-3 the score. 1 out working against them. Loaded bases for Newark Academy. It's a high-flying hit. Not to find much. 1 strike now working against them. 2 more outs needed for the Cougars to stave off the scare and to maintain that coveted senior day victory here at the middle school, as it's another heavy hit. To be caught by Rendino. He's got it. Jake Rendino, very clutch from the sophomore, and at long last able to summon in the second out. As our battery offers us not too much time left, all MKA needs is 1 final out. But in the process, Newark Academy has loaded bases. A double away from tying the tally here at the middle school on this senior day matchup. It all rests on this next at-bat right here. Can Rizzio see it through one final time for MKA? That one, a heavy hit, but ultimately a strike. And certainly Newark Academy swinging away in order to try to grab as ambitious a hit in order to see off the equalizer. Our camera battery would certainly not like that, as it shows a few minutes expiration. Nonetheless, the opportunity to see through one final out. They're down to their last out, Newark Academy. They've mounted an incredible response in the final inning to close the gap up to this point. 5-3 the tally. A double away for something magical. That one, not enough. 2-1 the tally. Could it just be a one-run game in the offing? Or will Rizzio be able to summon in 2 more strikes to see through the final out to secure senior day victory? That one, a boisterous hit, not enough. 2-2 the count. Now in the midst of a 5-3 score, all it takes is one final strike for Alessandro Rizzio to see through the victory for MKA. Everything resting on the next pitch from the sophomore. Much weight on the shoulders of number 14 right here. All resting on the next toss of his hand. For one final time to stave off the scare and secure victory. That one down there. Able to land a hit for the foul ball and keeping his presence at home plate. The circumstances remaining fixed. One final strike to secure victory for MKA over their rivals on this senior day. The wind picks up, the rain pours downward. Rizzio remains fixed. Straight down. Not enough to make it the full count here at the middle school. Now the opportunity remains as glaring as ever before. He could either win the game right here or with a ball to make it a one-run game. Everything hanging in the balance. It's a high-flying hit. It's going to be caught by Rendino, and MKA wins. Senior day triumph for the Cougars. And although one last scare was put off by Newark Academy, it is MKA who finds themselves triumphant on their senior day matchup amidst the thick rain of the downpour here at the middle school. Able to see off the 3 runs from Newark Academy in the final inning to make it a 5-3 victory for your MKA Cougars. And on behalf of everyone here at MKA TV, my name is Nicholas Baum, bidding farewell and see you next time.